I'm with Najam Sethi, the editor of the Friday Times in Lahore, Pakistan, and one of Pakistan's most astute political observers and commentators. We were live just a few minutes ago, and Mr. Sethi was describing the situation in Pakistan in the wake of the Pakistan Prime Minister's decision to call for dissolving all the assemblies in Pakistan. And minutes before that, around 12:30 p.m. India time, the Deputy Speaker of the Pakistan National Assembly called to dissolve the House. So a day of very fast-moving developments in Pakistan. Mr. Sethi, your first comments. Are you surprised at what's going on?
No, I'm not surprised. I'm shocked. I mean, this is unprecedented. Even in the worst case scenario, we hadn't thought this would be the option for Imran Khan. But then he's a reckless man and he's now put his foot into it. The situation is that he had 140 members in parliament. The opposition was able to put together nearly 200. The vote of no confidence was a foregone conclusion. And he has been saying from day one that I have an ace up my sleeve and I will not go down without a fight. So it was expected that he would try and do something to thwart it. He started off by talking of an international conspiracy by the United States to undermine Pakistan and especially his regime. That has been going on now for at least 10 days, which is full of contradictions and holes. Nonetheless, he and his supporters have persisted with it. And then 2 days ago, it seemed as though there was a rupture with the armed forces. When General Bajwa, the army chief, went to a national security seminar and publicly said that we value the friendship with the United States and the West. We have trading and aiding relations. And so on and so forth. And there is no way that he was fully in support of the United States and the West. And so now you had these two gentlemen on different pages, completely different pages. And it was expected that Imran would then hit back in some way or the other. That too is unprecedented for the differences to come out into the open like this. Normally these things take place behind the scenes. Still, that's where we are now. And so what he's done today is that he's gone until yesterday, he'd said that he will not tell his members of parliament to go. He was threatening to resign en masse and create a new situation, which is again would be unprecedented, but still that would have been followed by by-elections and so on. So it wasn't as though that could not be dealt with. And then this morning he changed his mind and told his members of parliament to go to parliament and be there. And then he got a member of parliament, his information minister, who's also now, as of today, become the law minister also. He read out a statement saying that under clause 5 or article 5 of the Constitution, every citizen owes a loyalty to the state. And against the United States, these people are conspirators and therefore reject this motion. And the Speaker duly did that and prorogued the Assembly indefinitely. It was then pointed out by people that Article 5 of the Constitution has two parts. The first part is, of course, that every citizen owes loyalty to the state. And the second part is that the Constitution is inviolable. And there's a second section to the Constitution, which is Article 6, which follows immediately after that. And that anyone who violates the Constitution can be charged with high treason, for which the punishment is death, and so on. So using this clause, the Speaker has done the unthinkable. And then within minutes of that, Imran Khan came live on television in probably a recorded or maybe an extempore speech lasting a couple of minutes, in which he said that he'd saved the nation from a great conspiracy. These are all traitors. And the Speaker has done the right thing. And then he went on to say that he advised the President to dissolve the Assembly and set up a caretaker government to conduct the next election. It wasn't entirely clear, Jyoti, that what will happen. He wasn't clear himself. It was though that this is something on the spur of the moment he thought about it. Dissolution, yes, but what happens afterwards, he has no clue. In fact, this itself is illegal. There's no provision that says he can do this. Shocking, actually, even for the opposition that doesn't trust him a bit. And his hope was that the opposition would protest. There was some talk in the opposition that they should go and seize the podium after the speaker has departed, which he got up and did immediately, and then set up their own speaker, elect their own speaker. They have an overwhelming majority, elect their prime minister, and set up their government.
Right.
And then the wiser councils prevailed and said, well, that's exactly what he wants, two governments that will compel the army to move in. So let's not do something like that. Let's instead approach the Supreme Court to hold this. Whatever happened today is unconstitutional.
So several questions from what you just said, Mr. Sethi. The first is, it seems to me that the captain of Pakistan, Imran Khan, is a sore loser. Would you say?
Bitter, angry, enraged, wounded, terrible loser. Yes, that's what I would say.
So he would rather save himself at any cost, but put the constitution of Pakistan, the whole political class, the people of Pakistan, the civil society, in a state of not just shock and awe, but in a constitutional crisis.
Well, it's dubious whether he can save himself. I think his philosophy is, I'll burn the house down if I can't live in it myself.
I'm going to ask you to repeat that because we lost the line. It was a bad connection. It is a bad.
I said his philosophy is to burn the house down if he can't live in itself.
So after him, the deluge, basically. So he wants to stand, and he wants to go down in the history books of Pakistan, clearly.
I'm not sure the history books will treat him with any respect. I think the Supreme Court will step in a day or two, and his position is likely to be overturned. But the interesting thing is just this business of asking the president to hold fresh elections is a bit of a googly. It's a political googly because although it's not in the constitution, his people will come to the Supreme Court and argue and say, what's the big deal? The opposition has been saying they want a fresh election. And when we refused to give it to them, they went in for this vote of no confidence. And in this vote of no confidence, there was a lot of horse trading and so on and so forth. And you're already looking at that question of horse trading. So we decided that we shouldn't come to that. And although the Constitution says that I can't dissolve the assemblies while the vote of no confidence is in the field, the Speaker has rejected the vote of no confidence on credible grounds that he thinks are credible, that there's a foreign conspiracy. So therefore, the end result is the same. I've ordered fresh elections. That's the best way to resolve this constitutional crisis. And there's no need to get into anything else. And let's get on with it. And he thinks, by the way, that because he's talked about this foreign conspiracy, and because he has a lot of hotheads in his party, he thinks his popularity is quite high right now because he's riding a wave of populism, which is persecution, religion. He constantly evokes images of the state of Medina, the moral high ground, right versus wrong, good versus evil. He's been exhorting the armed forces to stand with him, stand in his fight against the evil of corruption and these quote unquote rats that he's called them and so on. So he thinks that he has a good chance of fighting the opposition in an election right now. But because the opposition had other plans now, the opposition was hoping to have a government in the field for 3 to 6 months, whereby they would have consolidated themselves with the resources of the state. Then they would have gone in for a fresh election and they would have swept that election. And now he's called the elections. So it's a moot point. The Supreme Court may well say that what's happened is all illegal and all unconstitutional. But there is a call for fresh elections. And so let's get on with it. And so on. On the other hand, the Supreme Court might follow the letter of the Constitution, which says that what he's done is completely unconstitutional. He may overturn the ruling of the Speaker and say, go back and get that vote of confidence done, otherwise we'll hold you in contempt. In which case the Speaker will have to do it. And in which case the opposition will overthrow him constitutionally, Imran Khan. And then they will set up their own government, and in due course, they may they will announce the general elections. So we have these two options: the constitutional course versus a political compromise course. Um, the current Chief Justice and the judges are all inclined to be constitutionalists, but they're also aware of the fact that there is a strong minority opinion in Pakistan right now that supports Imran Khan, and he has the demagogic credentials. So we have to wait and see what sort of bench the Supreme Court Chief Justice sets up
So
to
these
hear
two,
these petitions.
yeah, so these two scenarios that you,
Sorry?
I said these two scenarios that you have illustrated so beautifully. Now, the big question in my mind is that you said that just a couple of days ago, the Pakistan Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa at a speech in Islamabad at the Islamabad Security Dialogue actually said something very different from what Imran Khan has been saying. Mr. Khan has been accusing the US of conspiring to overthrow him. But Mr. Bajwa said that relations between Pakistan and the US are very good. So what does this mean?
He hasn't said they're very good. He says we seek good relations with the United States.
Okay.
But the interesting thing is this, that there was a meeting of the National Security Council, which comprises the Prime Minister, the Cabinet, and 4 members of the armed forces, the Chairman, Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the 3 service chiefs. That is the composition of the National Security Council of the Cabinet. And the Prime Minister called this meeting in the expectation that he would get the NSC to declare a conspiracy. But clearly, the chiefs disagreed with him. And at best, the press release that came out after a meeting of the National Security Council, comprising an overwhelming majority of cabinet members and the Prime Minister, but only the 4 military men, turned around and said that we should issue a démarche to the foreign government. They didn't name the government that is alleged to have made these remarks about difficult relations between Pakistan and so on, and no more than that. So they didn't subscribe to the conspiracy theory. This happens all the time. Ambassadors discuss things with each other, routine matters. This would be good, that would be bad. If you do this, then you have to remember that this will happen and that will happen. These conversations take place all the time. And this particular conversation that the Pakistani High Ambassador in Washington is reported to have had with an Undersecretary of State, nobody's seen the letter that the Pakistan High Commission Ambassador wrote on the basis of his notes of that meeting. And so there, there is, that is not terribly credible. And of course, the United States has denied any such thing. So we have that situation. But there are a lot of people in this country. This, anti-Americanism has been rife in this country for the last 20 years. It's growing. Religiosity is coming back. There's middle-class alienation and angst at the failing economy, lack of jobs, rising criminality, and so on. And a lot of these people were sick and tired of the same old faces rotating again and again. People's Party, Muslim People's Party, Muslim. And so they thought Imran Khan was a breath of fresh air. There would be a new Pakistan. He promised them all sorts of things. And within 4 years, their hopes were dashed. But at the end of the day, my sense is that the hostility towards the old ancien regimes still persists, even though there's enormous disillusionment with Imran. So we have a situation where if there were a vote today, I dare say that the opposition parties, especially Nawaz Sharif and Punjab, would win. There's a lot, all the polls show that he's very popular. And Imran is no longer as popular as he was. And in any case, everybody in this country knows how Imran was brought to power by the military establishment, how those elections were rigged, and then how they managed to prop him up. And now, for the first time in 4 years, they stepped back a little because they were hurting, because he wasn't performing and people were beginning to target them and saying, you brought him in, look how you screwed up everything. You are responsible. And so that had never happened. So I think they stepped back a little bit. The minute they stepped back, the opposition thought, here's a grand opportunity. He's no longer protected by them. Let's move in and see what we can do. And they're very successful because people can see that if there is going to be a new election, people who will stand on a PTI ticket, Imran Khan's ticket, are not going to be able to succeed. They're not going to be able to win too many seats. which is why, of course, he's also not decided to resign. If he had resigned, there would have been a by-election, and then he would have probably lost 70% of his current seats to the opposition parties.
So in this situation, when the Pakistani military establishment brought Imran Khan in, he was their puppet in a sense. And today the master puppeteers, you're saying, have pulled back. But in a situation like this, is Imran Khan then just functioning of his own accord? Or whose support does he have today? Where does he get the courage from to dissolve the assemblies, to, to tell the Speaker of the House to reject a no confidence motion? I mean, who is this Imran Khan?
This is a madman. I'm sorry to have to say that. He's lost it. He's decided that he's going to take on everybody, and is not going to play by the rules, unfortunately. And as I said, there's a whole younger generation out here that still supports him. It's become a bit of a cult figure, and he's playing on that wicket. But clearly now, the military establishment is alienated from him, and his own support base, I think, is going to dwindle after this fiasco.
But can I play devil's advocate and say that in Pakistan, for example, this is the first time that a no confidence vote was brought under the constitution against an elected government? You've never had any government lasting 5 years in Pakistan's history. So to play devil's advocate and to ask you, Imran Khan was actually, he was defending himself and his government, even though he sort of evokes, the religious sort of symbols all the time, Allah, Medina, a lot of that he does in all the 3 speeches he had in the last few days. But he is trying to save his government. And today, what he did, was it constitutionally wrong in any way, or was he able to sort of circumvent the constitution and use the clauses to his benefit?
No, clearly it's unconstitutional. There's no debate about that. And you'll see the Supreme Court will come out and say clearly all this is unconstitutional. That's not the issue. I think the point that perhaps you're trying to make is that why not let him complete his term? He's got another 1 year to go. Why bring a vote of no confidence against him? Wait another year and then have general elections that they do, which is what a lot of people say. But they have nothing else to say. They say, well, why not let him finish his term? And then the argument is given that, well, let an elected government last 5 years. Well, here are the facts. Last 2 governments lasted 5 years each. The fact was that the prime ministers didn't last. There had to be a change in midst, at the end, because cases were brought against them. But unfortunately, that's the problem. There is that not everybody believes they were fairly ousted, the prime ministers. But still, for the sake of argument, even if they were, nobody seemed to have any issues with getting rid of prime ministers midway or before their term ends, as long as the governments continue. Here you have a situation where a vote of no confidence has been legally brought, it's constitutional. And they have the numbers, and that the constitution envisages this situation. Imran is highly unpopular. All the polls show that people are angry. And there's been a lot of mismanagement. And so the opposition is well within its constitutional rights to do something like this. And they are not saying we would have elections tomorrow. They may well allow the next government that comes in to last till. So the government can change, parliament remains the same, the numbers become different.
So the question,
so that's not an argument that works.
Okay, but the question is that today the military establishment has pulled its hand back. He no longer is under their chhatra chaya, if you like. But Nawaz Sharif, who was forced to flee the country, what happens to him now? His party, the PMLN, the Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz, they are the key opposition party. What happens in that situation?
Well, clearly, obviously, if the vote of no confidence had succeeded, there would have been a new government. That government was going to be headed by Nawaz Sharif's younger brother. And I think Nawaz would have come back and fought the 2 cases that are pending against him. He's always said that there's been rigging in the prosecution has rigged the cases against him, and given a fair chance, he will acquit himself. And that was highly likely because the cases are very weak in the eyes of experts. And so he will come back. Now, I think he will have to wait until this issue is resolved, and then maybe make an attempt to come back and fight his cases.
So under the current circumstances, do you feel that the military establishment is somewhat divided on the Imran Khan issue? Is Faiz Hamid, the former DG-ISI, now the corps commander of the Peshawar Corps? There were some reports that that he was still supporting Nawaz Sharif, but that the military establishment overruled that and brought Nadeem Anjum, and who is the current DG-ISI. What's the state of play inside the Pakistani military?
I think the military is united. The high command, it's very unlikely that there's going to be a split in the high command. There may be junior officers who have different views, but at the end of the day, it's the 5 or 6 senior people in the GHQ and in the corps who really matter. And I think there's a consensus there about 2 things. The first consensus was that General Faiz, who was then DG-ISI, had gone too far politically to support Imran Khan, and thereby led to the discrediting of the military. And therefore, it's time for a change of command of the ISI. Number one. Number two, Imran Khan had, by bad management, brought discredit to the institution of the army. It is important to step back. No more than that. And I think they finally took them a long time to be able to get Imran to convince him to shunt the DG-ISI General Faiz to Peshawar, and for them to appoint one of their own people, which has always been the case. Very rarely in Pakistan's history has a prime minister succeeded in appointing his own man as DG-ISI, and without resistance from within the army. The army is always advised, the procedure is they send up 3 names to the prime minister. It goes from GHQ to defense, and defense puts it up to the prime minister. And there's an understanding that, you'll appoint so-and-so. And only once in the past, twice, Benazir tried to appoint her own man as DG-ISI. They didn't forgive her for it, and eventually she lost the government. And nobody followed his orders. And there was another time when Nawaz Sharif did the same thing, appointed his own man as DG-ISI from amongst the various senior generals. And Nawaz was not forgiven for that, and again lost his job. The army guards this preserve of the ISI very jealously. And will not allow a prime minister to quote unquote appoint his own man. The argument is that we are nobody's men, we are our own men. We have an institution, we are autonomous in many senses, we follow the constitution, but we will not allow anybody to interfere in our workings, in our national security doctrines. You remember they had issues with Nawaz Sharif over how to conduct relations with India, and so on. And so that's happened twice in the past. Even though later they may turn around and do exactly the same thing, but they want to be fully consulted on what to do and what not to do on national security issues. So Imran was also now, branching out, trying to make his own national security policy, which led to strained relations with Saudi Arabia, strained relations with America and the West, and unresolvable problems with Afghanistan, and so on. So there was a lot of angst about where the hell is he taking us? What is he trying to do? And so on. So no, I think there's the army is united. They don't want to go and impose martial law, but I think they've had enough of Imran Khan. And originally it was thought that they wouldn't do anything to bring Nawaz back because he'd also meddled in their affairs. But now I think a compromise was effected that Nawaz wouldn't come back to play a powerful role in government. But Shahbaz, with whom they've had very good relations, who's always been very close to the establishment and never ever harmed them or hurt them. So a compromise was struck that in the event that your party wins, that can you get Shahbaz Sharif to come in, we can work with him. So I think that was what was on the cards, and I think that is still on the cards.
So can you just repeat this last couple of sentences again, because the line was quite bad. You said that there is possibly a compromise between Nawaz Sharif and the military establishment. Is that correct? Is that what you said?
No, I didn't say that. No, I didn't say that.
Okay.
I said that they are happy to work with someone like Shahbaz Sharif, who's never stepped on the toes of the establishment. That's what I said.
Okay. And what about Nawaz Sharif? Is he going to remain in exile, or can he come back?
He'll come back if there's a government that is going to give him a fair deal. And that government can only be a government run by his party, and especially by Shehbaz Sharif. And once Shehbaz Sharif becomes Prime Minister, then Nawaz Sharif will come back.
Okay, so last couple of questions, Mr. Sethi. In the Punjab Assembly today, also there was going to be a vote of no confidence against the existing the PTI chief minister. Now, what happens to that? Is that also has that assembly also been dissolved, or is that just a?
No, the vote has been prorogued. The speaker didn't have, the government didn't have enough votes to win. So, so they've also done an unconstitutional thing and prorogued it and said we'll meet again on the 6th. There's total confusion, a violation of the constitution by government and its allies everywhere, unfortunately.
So the former chief minister of Punjab, Mr. Bazdar, has just quietly faded away into oblivion. I mean, he was chief minister for 4 years. He didn't stand up for himself at all.
Well, then there's this theory that says that until a new chief minister is elected, he's still hanging around somewhere or the other. But it's all very unclear, because what happened was that yesterday Imran Khan sacked his own governor of Punjab.
That's it.
Why? Because the governor was delaying issuing the order going on. So the governor is being sacked, and now there's been a hurriedly appointed party loyalist as another governor. It's total chaos.
Mr. Sethi, thank you so much for your time, and we will be in touch with you. But thank you so much for speaking to The Print and for explaining the situation in Pakistan today. Thank you again.
Thank you.